What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to give you a quick overview of some of the current data points and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. With that said, let's get right to it. SoFi pulled down 2.6% as far as volume. Fairly good considering a lot of other growth stocks were having a little bit abnormal lower volume. So 49.5 million shares were traded, 59.5 is the average. These are some of the transactions that did occur on the secondary market above $100,000. So bigger money was essentially buying the dip. Of course, good old 𝗖𝗓𝗡𝗡𝗘𝗖𝗧 did buy another 19 or almost 20,000 shares today. So I think this is with a 7th consecutive trading day. So that's kind of a good thing. Aside from that, you do see a lot of big transactions. But all in all, the market is trying to digest the CPI data and is now trying to estimate on when the Feds might be cutting rates. A lot of people are starting to say it's going to be in June. I think Morgan Stanley just came out with June as more so the beginning point, whereas a lot of analysts, such as this individual, saying that there won't be any cuts in 2024. So you're having analysts kind of all over the place, and a lot of analysts have one strong consensus that Powell won't be cutting any rates close to the election. So of course that kind of rules out a couple months. So potentially December might be back open, and then maybe July up to then possibly. So who knows? We'll just have to wait and see, but that is causing a lot of volatility in the market. And when it comes down to SoFi's recent earnings, Chris did say, I think it was roughly 3 or 4. That's what they are assuming for rate cuts in 2024. So we'll just have to wait and see. A lot of growth stocks are going to be very much dependent on those rate cuts. And for instance, if that doesn't happen, or potentially at the tail end of 2024, I feel like a lot of stocks might potentially suffer. But even though there was a lot of volatility today, you did see a lot of good value plays, such as SoFi, getting bought up. So that's kind of a positive thing. As of today, there was no news, no SEC filings, nothing like that. So it was kind of rather quiet. Shorts were increasing 1.78 million shares, 18.43% of the free float is being shorted. That works out to be 168.26 million shares overall are being shorted. Cost per hour average is 1.4%. And as I mentioned in my pre-market video, basically, there's 2 times every month that the NASDAQ does disclose the true numbers. So they did that yesterday, and that was for February the 29th. So still somewhat delayed information, on which they said at that time, so February the 29th, there was 16.93% of the free float being shorted, and roughly 154.36 million shares overall are being shorted. So Ortex takes that information and tries to populate it up to today's date. And so this is how we do get 18.43%. Aside from that, though, you do see a lot of options turning very bullish. So today, $5.71 million in calls being purchased versus $2.44 million in puts. And based on a lot of the strike prices, there's a consensus for roughly about 6 months from now, about $10 plus. And so, of course, I think a lot of us realistically feel that it should be double digits right now. Just there's a lot of different manipulation forms out there. So who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts on, for instance, SoFi, and if you are one of those individuals doing options, what strike prices and potentially what expiry date are you guys picking? Of the call options that are being purchased, there's a consensus for it to be above $8 by the end of this week. And then looking at puts, there's a consensus for it to be looks like $7. So the risk versus reward is somewhat evenly divided. But based on this, so right now with it at $7.48, it is trading between this S1 and the pivot. So as I kind of mentioned a couple days back, $7.17 will be that next strong support. And most likely, based on the technicals, it is pointing that it's going to kind of touch that. Whether it bounces off of that, I feel like is kind of fair to assume that it will, on which then it'll kind of just trend up back to kind of this range, because it keeps flirting with that 750 point, and most likely that's going to be associated to options. But aside from that, below that is 668, and then 589, and then above that is 797 and 876. So just take a mental note of a lot of the support and resistance points. But aside from that, looking on the actual chart, it is lower percentile of the Bollinger Band, and looking on stochastic, because of the recent volatility and the kind of the pull down in the stock price, that has reset the technicals. So looking at stochastic, you do see it at 20, so that is considered very oversold. So if there's a good piece of news specific to SoFi or maybe the broader market, this is where you could see a even more rush of institutional value investors into SoFi. And as of today, it doesn't look like there's any defined trend right now, and number of retail investors are slowly getting back in, and you can tell that based on the momentum indicator. So all in all, I feel like the technicals are somewhat still kind of pointing towards more downside, but I feel like right now, like I mentioned, it will be bouncing off of that $7.17 range, on which you'll be able to kind of retest this 100-day moving average and potentially go back into the 8s and then 9s and 10s and so forth. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi. What have you been doing? Have you been buying? Have you been selling? What have you been doing? And what is your thoughts, for instance, on good old Kathy buying as much shares as she has? Do you think that it's kind of to make up for her selling previously? I think she sold during, what was it, 2023, at the beginning part, like at $7 or something, or it might have been $8, I forget. But do you think she's just trying to make up for that, or is there some bigger purpose? So don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And with all that, appreciate all of you watching.